In this tutorial, we are going to make a very simple sugar flower with a lot of different techniques. And let's begin with making the center. I'm taking a little bit of gum paste, making a ball and then a teardrop shape out of it, and that's a 18G wire which I'm inserting into the narrow end of the teardrop shape. I'm just sealing the bottom end of the teardrop with a wire so the center is properly adhered to the wire. And I'm flattening the top up and then shaping the bottom rounded. I'm using a scratch tool to create some textures on the top of the center and then a little on the sides of the center as well. We'll move on to adding stamens to the center, and that's artificial stamens. I'm cutting down to a length of about 1 inch. I'm going to use both the sides of it. I'm beginning with one side of the stamens. I'm using water to brush the sides of the center, the Gumpaste center that was made. I'm going to grab a few stamens at a time and then start sticking them around the center. It's a wise idea to grab about 3 to 4 stamens at a time. Adding one by one is going to be a little more tedious. And if the applied water is dried out around the sides, more water has to be added. I'm continuing to add more stamens as much as it will look a bit crowded and nice. Now to add the pollens to the center, I'm using gelatin here. I like to use gelatin because it blooms in contact with water. But you could use the broken grains like the wheat or rice, and they would not bloom coming in contact with water. But they are also a good addition to pollens. You could color them with edible gel colors and work with pollens in the color you want for the center. Now adding water to the center where you want the pollens to be attached. Then add more water where you want more pollens. And sprinkle enough gelatin and dust back the excess into the bowl. I'm just using a tool to make sure the pollens are just equally distributed. And now moving on to cutting the petals, and that's a bit of white gum paste and kneading a bit. I'm making a ball out of it, and then to making a sausage shape. I'm going to start rolling it out to a thick ribbon shape to begin with, and keeping it a little thicker, like say about an mm or 2, and then leaving one side of the ribbon thick. I'm rolling out the other end as thin as possible. And if the Gumpaste sheet is sticky to the counter, dusting some corn flour and rolling it back again, making one side of the sheet thinner, leaving the bottom thick. I'm using a small sized rose cutter, keeping the bottom end of the cutter with the thicker side of the rolled out gum paste. Just make sure the cuts are clean. Now I'm going to cut out a total of 4 petals. Now I'm making sure the bottom end of the petal is the thicker side of the sheet that was rolled. Now to wiring and veining. And that's a 26G wire I'm inserting into the bottom thicker end of the petal, making sure the wire is gone as much, and then pinching down the bottom edge, making sure the wire is properly attached to the petal. Now to move on to attaching the wire to all the 4 petals. And now moving on to veining. That's a double-sided silicone veiner. I'm placing the petals in between both the silicone veiner. I'm pressing it down. And the petal is nicely veined now. I'll be doing it to all the 4 petals, and all the 4 petals are now veined. Now moving on to ruffling up the petals and then shaping them in cups, and that's a ball tool. I'm using it to go around the edges of the petals, keeping half of the ball tool on the foam pad and half of the ball tool on the petal itself, and giving the ruffles that I need. And that's a paint palette which had the cup shape that I want for the size of the petal I was using. You could use egg cartons in its place to give that shape. And placing the petals in the cups, I'm bending the wire so it takes the shape of the shape former. I'm retaining the ruffles of the petals a bit, but still keeping the cup shape that I want for the petals. And this needs to rest for about 3 to 4 hours to take the shape. And now moving on to coloring the petals with petal dusts. The petals are dry now, though it's a little flexible, it's taken the shape. I'm using to color with the English rose petal dust color. And that's a bit of brown luster I just wanted to highlight, just a little bit at the bottom end of the petal. I'm going back to the English rose color, adding it on the edges. And then now I'm adding quite a bit of the color on the bottom of the petal, keeping the bottom a little more brighter than the edge of the petals. Now I want to dust the back side of the petal as well, the same way I did the front of it. And now once that is done, I will dust all the petals in a similar way. Now moving on to taping the petals with the center. I have all the 4 petals nicely dusted, and now I will bend the petal, making sure the wire of that petal goes with the wire of the center. Now using the floral tape, I'm going to tape around that first petal together with the center, going fully 1 round with a tape around. And now the second petal, I am bending it. Now I'm going to place it adjacent to the first petal, and go around with the tape, keeping it tight. And now the third petal is getting overlapped inside of the second petal. And now the fourth petal gets tucked in the third petal, and the other end is on the outside of the first petal, and that way you have a uniform overlapping of the petals around. Now I'm continuing to tape all the wires together till the end. And that's one complete flower. Now I'm going to make a little more such flowers and then make a spray out of it. Now I've made 4 such flowers and 3 small buds. Now to begin with taping, I'm going to tape the 3 buds together first. Now I'm starting to tape the first flower. I'm just taping and coming down a bit, and that will give me space for the second flower as I tape it together. Now I'm positioning the buds to tape it around in the spray. Now moving on to the third flower and taping it down. And now comes the last and the fourth flower. I'm taping all the wires together till the end. I'm using a tweezer to just reposition the flowers and the buds in the way I want. I just want to touch the tip of the buds with the same English rose petal dust that I used for the flowers to just keep it the color of the flower itself. I'm just dusting the tip of the bud alone and not the entire bud. And now I want to color the stem, which is the wire part of the spray, in the same color as the flower. It's just a fantasy flower. I didn't want the stems to be green here. That would act like a contrast to the flower I'm making. It's just the way I want it. So I'm just dusting the tape part the same color as the flower. Now I'm just making sure the entire tape part is colored with the dust. And that's how the final spray looks, and thank you so much for watching the video.